Well, don't forget the golden rule: treat others as you want to be treated.
Sound off like you got a pair.
Sir, yes, sir!
Give, and it will be given to you. For in the same way that you give, so shall you receive.
Good afternoon, folks. This is your host, Ben Buehler-Garcia. We're back. We hope you really enjoyed that interview with the USS Tucson, the new commander of the USS Tucson. Bet you didn't know we had our very own submarine right here in the desert. Hey, folks, before we get into today's show, let me just remind you, if you haven't already, please call your mom. Let her know. If it wasn't for her, you wouldn't be here. I lost my mother a year ago. Small woman with the heart of a giant, courage of a lion, tiny little hands that help people all over the world. So don't take it for granted. Like I said, call your mom, buy a card. I mean, heck, you can even go to Walgreens, I think, today, and they've got flowers there for a few bucks. Make sure she knows that you care and love her about her. So getting into today's show, we're going to talk about something that defines each and every person. It's kind of interesting, science. I like to use science, and even though I don't use math in public, all human beings have got certain common traits. We might be a little bit taller, we might be a little bit shorter, we might be a little bit wider in my case, but mostly 10 fingers, 10 toes, 1 heart, 2 eyes. We're pretty much the same as far as it comes to biology. But there's something, despite those commonalities, this is going to blow your mind. In the history of mankind, of all the hundreds of millions or perhaps billions of people that have walked this earth, no two people have walked the same path. Even a 4-place combination lock only has 10,000 potential combinations, John, but individuals, even identical twins, once we're born and we get started, there's something that makes us, that distinguishes us, that makes us unique, each and every one of us. And that is personality. Now, the official definition of personality, it can be defined as a consistency in a person's way of being. That is a long-term consistency in their particular way of perceiving, thinking, acting, or reacting as a person. Organized patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior. So take a moment right now. Think about your best friends. How would you, one word, are they quiet? Are they consistent? Are they flaky? What is their personality? All of us have been around somewhere where someone just walks into a room and you can feel it. They just seem to dominate the room. And I think the word for that is gravitas, one of my favorite words. But today we're going to talk about personality and the importance of personality. And just before I introduce my guest, I want to use a quote here, John, because you'll appreciate this. You might like this lady here. Mae West said, "Personality is the glitter that sends your little gleam across the footlights and across the orchestra pit into that big black space where the audience is." So, ladies and gentlemen, joining me today on Daily Mail, a guy with a very, very unique personality, Renaissance man, John Essinger. John, welcome to Daily Mail.
Thank you, Ben. I'm happy to be here. Of course, I'm happy to be anywhere, but today...
I say after that introduction, that's all I did. Thanks, I'm happy to be here. We're here to talk about personality. Come on, liven it up, John. Pick it up.
I'm happy to be anywhere, especially here with you.
Well, I tell you, the part of the reason I wanted to talk to you about this, the focus of this show is to give young people and those raising young people a set of skills and just to spur some thought about what they can do to make their lives better, to improve themselves. But really, this topic applies to all of us. We're all constantly growing and changing on this planet. If you're not growing, you're dying. I mean, that's kind of the rule here. But what I brought you in because you are a person who, from my perception, John, just by sheer force of your personality, you've had a lot of ups and downs, but you have risen and been very successful in lots of different areas. And you've seen that. You interact quite a bit with people out there, and so often that just this concept of personality, what someone brings to that first impression is so important. So you've got some thoughts to share about that. Where do you want to start?
Well, let me start by saying I grew up in the Texas and Oklahoma panhandle. Back in the late 40s and early 50s. One of the situations I had that forced me to have or work on a nice personality was when everybody was 3 feet tall, I was 2 feet tall. and so on as it goes.
I hear you, brother. I share that.
Yeah.
That unique personality trait. Right?
Yeah, and so I was always the subject of intimidation and bullies. Mm-hmm. And, of course, bullying is not a new thing. And early on, the only way I could figure out how to get along with these people was to be nice. Well, I found out that works up to a point, but sometimes some people consider that a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
So as time went on, I had to sort out being nice for the wrong reason. Eventually, especially with the people I grew up around, and I grew up around a lot of really awesome people, poor folks out in the country, everybody was kind of looking out for each other, except for the bullies who pushed me around. And I want to toss in here, I am really grateful for that, because it forced me early on to make some changes and move in a direction I didn't even know I was going.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was two major events. One is I wound up in a hospital because of a bully in Texhoma, and I wound up having surgery, and I really wanted to hurt that guy. Matter of fact, I still do, but I'm not going to, because I win, he lost. And as a result, I started paying attention to the older people around me and watching how they operated.
And now, how old were you at the time?
Well, I was about 15 when that happened.
Okay.
And then right after that incident, which totally changed my life, I wound up with a paper route in downtown Amarillo, Texas, in high school. Now, in high school, being a paper boy wasn't the most popular thing. Back then, if my memory serves me right, it was you worked at the filling station, you had a hot rod car. Well, I delivered papers, and I spent all my free time and what little extra money I had at the airport. In the end, I won that war and the battle, because traditionally, cars are nice and all that sort of stuff, but I found that several of the girls really thought it was kind of cool. Here's this really weird guy who flies airplanes, and I think I've gotten past the statute of limitations.
Okay, okay, go ahead.
Okay.
I need to put my finger on that red button.
Okay. I had a student pilot's license. I've always taken flying airplanes very serious. I wasn't out trying to impress anybody. And before I got my private pilot's license, I was kind of sneaking out the airport and taking my friends flying. And matter of fact, I had a conversation the day before yesterday with one of the guys that I took flying, and he still remembers that, and he still likes me.
Well, that's a good start.
And
so you needed personality to talk your way out of being arrested, maybe.
Well, I was working on that. I had that as a backup. And then the last thing that I want to put some emphasis on, which will give us a basis to start on, I had a very, I would call it a sad situation now in my home. And as a result, I wound up in a foster home.
Mm-hmm.
And my foster mom, who's really my mom, and I wish you were here, Mom, you wouldn't believe this, but the morning after this really terrible event, she came into the room, and I was at her house, and she said, I got something here I want you to read. And so I stood up. I was on the floor listening to the stereo. I stood up, and she handed me this book. And she said, I'd like for you to read this. And I said, okay. And, of course, anything she suggested, I was all over it.
Sure.
And so she handed me this book called Think and Grow Rich, written by Napoleon Hill. She said, well, let me back up. She says, you don't have to read the whole book. You just pick out a chapter that appeals to you. Read that one chapter. Well, Ben, before the weekend was over, read the whole book. And it just goes on from there. But that was really the basis, because chapter 9 is how to have a pleasing personality.
Excellent. Now, we've got just about a minute before the commercial, John. Let's sort of frame the subject matter, because you and I both are involved in business. We're involved both on our business side and our volunteer side, just interacting a lot with people. And, folks know about the importance of making a good first impression. But what builds that so often, and what I think really leads to success interacting with people and interacting with business, is the importance of developing and having the comfort level of expressing what your natural personality is. So we're going to take a quick break, folks. We're here on Daily Mail live in the studio. John Essinger, Renaissance Man, is our guest. Hey, listen, if you'd like to interact, give us a call, 751-1041. We'll be right back after this break. Jim, I should recognize this, and I don't. Okay. Folks, this is your host, Ben Buehler-Garcia. It's kind of cloudy out there. I'm struggling with allergies like all of you. We're back on Daily Mail. We're joined by John Essinger, a Renaissance guy, someone I've come to really respect, not just for his success in business and some of the things he's achieved in life, but frankly, he's one of those people that when you walk in the room, he's just unique. I mean, you can feel him. His personality, his energy precedes him into the room. So we're talking today a little bit about personality and why that makes such a difference, whether you're a young person growing up or just finding your way in the world, or whether you're someone like me who's maybe kind of on the backside of the slide here, John. Now, let me quote Pablo Picasso. He said, "Youth is the period of assumed personalities and disguises. It is the time of being sincerely unsincere." So, John, what does it matter? Why, if I'm out there a young person, why should I care? What value is having a pleasing personality?
Well, I think it's very simple. If you look around at the people who are successful in whatever their endeavor is, for the most part, unless you're a jailer, but it even helps for that. If you treat people the way you want to be treated, and you dare to be yourself, it relaxes people around you. Mm-hmm. It took me a long time to get it into some kind of focus, and now it's become it's just an operational thing. I meet somebody, and I love meeting frumpy people. Frumps, I think, are great because most frumps aren't as frumpy as they want to be or they think they are. If you come up and you treat them with a good handshake, and you look them in the eyeball, and you say something nice to them, or if you just speak to them in a very kind and sincere voice, all of a sudden their guard is down. Mm-hmm. And that works all across the board. And you know, Ben, you and I have been into some situations where we've been around some pretty important people.
Sure.
And yes, I'm always a little nervous, but I don't treat them any different than I do my best friend from elementary school, Buddy Kentrell.
Now, John, just to clarify, because you brought this up there, the importance of being pleasing and being friendly and being open. But we have also interacted, and I'm sure most of our listeners also have interacted with people where you just it's sticky, it's sappy, it's just, hey, how you doing? And you're looking in this. If you can get them to make eye contact, you're thinking you don't care. It's just, in fact, there's one particular local elected official who's, I'll tell you a classic example of that. How are you? And you don't care. They're just saying that. So to distinguish between the people that mean it for real and the folks who are just saying that, just kind of going through the steps. What?
Well, I think I know who you're talking about, and I run into a few people like that. And it all boils down to one simple notion, I think, and it's motive. What's the motive? You walk into a place where they're selling stuff. They're not there to be your friend, but they come on that way. Mm-hmm. But when I meet people, I don't care who it is. I meet people on airplanes. You know some of those stories. I've met people on airplanes 25 years ago, and we're still friends. And people sense that. Even those kind of people sense that you're real, and it really takes them off guard.
We had our guest on the show last week was talking about he'd given a speech called 10.5 Things No Commencement Speakers Ever Said. And it was a series of little things you need to know going on in life. And one of the things that the emphasis he made there was happiness, and how one of the main measures of someone's happiness is really about the relationships you develop over the course of life and how long those relationships are maintained. And it seems to me you're just sort of touching on that, the importance of when you're genuine and people sense that personality and it's real, you're really establishing the foundation for relationships that could go on forever. I mean, as long as you live.
Well, one of the things, and I learned it out of the book, Think and Grow Rich, and I think we did a show about networking. And what I learned from that is, in correlation with this, is when you're very sincere and you talk to people like they're people, and you're really and genuinely interested in what they have to say, two things happen. One, you connect, and two, it allows them the opportunity to connect back with you without any hitches and glitches.
Mm-hmm. Now, is there any time when having that kind of personality is a liability, and you're part of your 1,500 different jobs. I still don't know what you do for a living, but one of it is you produce and direct and act in films, sometimes Western films. There's a scene in the Kevin Costner film about Wyatt Earp, early on in the film, where he's talking to Ed, the character who's Ed Masterson's, Bat Masterson's brother in Tombstone, and he says, Ed, you're too affable to be in law enforcement. In other words, you're a friendly guy and that's okay, but you're in the wrong line of work for that. And then, later on it ended up getting him killed. Are there any liabilities in your mind of being too affable, being too friendly?
Well, absolutely. But the key to the whole thing is when you meet people, and this just comes with life experience. When you meet people and you learn to gauge what you're talking about, you know exactly what to say and what not to say. And then that allows you to make the next move that's probably in your best interest. And that's probably a stage right.
As an exit, stage right? Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Now, folks, if you would like to interact, give us a call. We're live in the studio with John Essinger. 520-751-1041 is our number right here at the KQTH studios. John, we're mostly talking about interaction between individuals, but earlier in the show I'd alluded about that feel, the gravitas, if you will, when someone walks into a room. What is the downside of that? Is there a reverse sort of a thing that happens when someone who just walks in, who's just a wet sock, who's got zero personality whatsoever? How does that impact the dynamic of a group or a situation?
Well, I think it all boils down to who the first person is that talks to them.
If anyone.
If anyone. And I take a little bit of pride in when I see somebody like that. I'll go up and strike up a conversation, and there's always a million things to discuss. And it doesn't have to be politics related or anything like that. There's just all kinds of sorts of things to discuss. And what I've learned that's helped me through every kind of crisis that I've ever been in is a sense of humor. And you can ask Buddy Cantrell and the guys that I went to school with and my cousins I grew up, they always thought I had a real screwy sense of humor. In the beginning, I didn't realize what I was developing. It was a sense of self-preservation because I didn't want somebody thumping me. and then once you learn how to use a sense of humor that's cross-board that everybody appreciates, and it's not a cheap shot at anybody.
Right.
And of course, I'm only 4 feet and 15 inches tall. And, my mustache is wide, almost wide as I am tall. and people notice that immediately. And when I sense that they're noticing that, I just bring it up in some kind of funny sort of way, and it breaks the ice. And when people, what I have discovered, Ben, is when people realize you're really sincere, sometimes if I could have been paid for being a counselor, man, I'd be rich now because, as you know, I've had a security clearance and I've signed non-disclosure. So when somebody tells me something, it doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
And so when you make people feel really comfortable, you find out everything you need to know.
Now, something I'm curious about, John, is a lot of your business that you do is international.
Yes, sir.
So you're interacting with not just a lot of people, but a lot of people from other cultures. Do you ever find yourself in a situation where they may just see you as slow down, American. We don't get that friendly that fast. We like to take some time to develop a relationship. Have you ever been in a situation where maybe it backfired or created a unique situation for you?
I can't think of one.
Okay.
I just got back earlier this last week from Nuevo Leon, and then a month ago I was in Africa, and I started my international travels in 1991, and what I discovered way back when is I'm just me, and it doesn't matter where I'm at. If I'm in China or Mongolia or Java or Greece, and you mentioned it earlier in the very beginning. It's about every person has a personality, but what I discovered is we're all the same, and I wish I had the patience to write a book about it. We are truly all the same, and I start off, and I don't push myself as an American or anything else. I just push myself as John Esslinger, and hey, let's do this and have fun. And with a sense of humor and a smile, it's amazing what you get done, and you don't even have to do anything because they'll do it for you.
So the direct question then is how can having clearly it's important to have some kind of personality, but how in your career, how have you seen how having a pleasing personality has really impacted your success and the success of your career? Because you're out there all the time. You've got to work. You've got to get new clients. You're always hustling for that next client. How important has that been in your personal life experience when it comes to business? Oh,
it's the most important thing there is, because if you don't get that done, nothing gets done.
Very good point. Very good point. Back when I was at the chamber, I did a lot of work in Mexico, and that was always very apparent, as they want to do business with somebody they know. It's not it's not kind of like the United States where you just kind of walk in, sign a contract, we're done, but they want to develop a relationship. So that's very important, yeah.
Well, that's pretty common across the human race and the planet, that very same concept. There's some cultures, and it doesn't matter who they are, they want to get down to business, and it's all about the business. And that's well and good. I'm capable of that, but I really love the interaction part, and just boil it down. All you got to do is be agreeable. You don't have to agree with them. You have to just be agreeable.
Well, now there's an important distinction there. Expound on that a little bit.
Well, if you agree with people, then you're signing on with what they have to sell, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. You can be agreeable to the fact that you're letting them sell you, but you don't have to buy it. One of the problems with a lot of people, they're instantly confrontational. And there's a couple of people knows that, they mistake my kindness as a weakness, and every now and then I enjoy a good throwdown. But you can be agreeable and not have to sell your soul, if that makes any sense.
Sure. So, maybe when we come back, we can talk a little bit about those boundaries, because I think there is a distinction there, and some folks may not understand that. It's okay when you have a personality, and I can tell you one of the worst things to me in the world when we talk about how to develop a good personality is there's nothing worse than talking to someone who doesn't have an opinion about anything. Oh. I may, look, we may not agree, but we can still have a good conversation. For goodness sakes, stand up for something once in a while. So when we come back, let's talk a little about when you said that having a pleasing personality started paying off early in your life. We talked about how that pays off on a regular basis now in your business career and some of the other stuff you're doing out in the community. Let's talk a little bit about that when you say about being agreeable and the cost of being agreeable, perhaps. Okay. Do you want to just kind of give folks a little tease lead into that?
Well, I think one of the things you got to stop and look at is the people that you know, and how our culture, including all those people, would think about being agreeable. A lot of people would interpret that as selling out. And you don't have to sell out to be agreeable. And the other side of that coin is if you're agreeable and you don't sell out, you still have the door open. And I've been in that situation a few times where I've had to go back or they've had to come back to me, and even though we had a disagreement, and we just pick up and carry on, take care of business.
Okay, excellent. Hey, folks, we are live in the studio with John Essinger. You can give us a call, 520-241-1041. Claudia, if you'll just hang on with us, we'll come back to you after the break. This is your host, Ben Buehler-Garcia, live here in the studio on Daily Mail. Stick around, folks. We'll be right back on this blustery day.
Girl, I'm not talking about the way she combs her hair. Look at that stupid girl, the way she powders her nose. Her vanity shows and it
shows. We're back, folks. This is your host, Ben Buehler-Garcia, live here on Daily Mail with John Essinger. Claudia gave us a call at 520-751-1041. Claudia, you're on the air. Now, I understand you guys are old high school buddies, so keep it clean.
Yes, we went to school. I didn't quite understand what you asked me.
Well, what have you got to say to John, or what have you got to add to the conversation?
I have such admiration for this man. He has the best outlook on life that I've ever known. We went to school together, but we didn't know each other very well. And then we went to, we got acquainted for our 40th or 43rd high school reunion for Paladura here in Amarillo. And I asked him, after talking to him, I said, John, would you be our MC, and he said, I'd be proud to. And he did a wonderful job. He has so many stories. He has such a wide amount of experiences that he just, and is such a storyteller that he just keeps you so interested and wins your heart over immediately, but just makes you feel like we've known each other forever and ever. And he's so genuine.
Claudia, he's blushing right here in the studio.
He's one of a kind. He's one of a kind.
Thank
and
you
there's
so much.
There's a lot of us that feel that way about him. But I think when you get older and you realize that from a classmate from 50 years ago now, it's a great honor to be able to tell him that.
Now, Claudia,
especially on radio.
Where are you calling from?
Amarillo.
You're calling all the way from Amarillo, Texas to Daily Mail. See, there you go, John. The reach.
Thank you, sir.
he reaches a lot of people, and he's been extraordinary. I just wanted to say how proud I am to know him.
Claudia, thank you so much for calling in. We really appreciate it, and keep listening to American Warrior Daily Mail Radio.
Thank you, Claudia.
We will. Thank you. Bye.
So,
Bye-bye.
John, through the magic of the interweb, we got folks listening from all over, and you're not quite blushing, but I can tell that's you get a little embarrassed now. What? Again, thank you so much, Claudia. If you'd like to call in, it's 520-751-1041. We're live in the studio today. John, we talked about as we're just going into the break, the costs of being agreeable, and we talked earlier in the show about that sort of fake, friendly, squishy person that comes up and you shake their hand and you want to wash your hands right afterwards. We also have probably all encountered sort of that yes man, that they're too agreeable all the time, and they're too much like clay in your hands. What are we born and stuck with the personality we're given, or what is the sort of the science, or what is it? What does experience tell us about that? You can't do math without knowing the basics. What are the basics of developing a personality or improving your personality? Maybe is a better way to put it.
Well, I think if you're born with, or if you think you were born with that, and you don't look at it objectively, yeah, you will be stuck with it. But I've done a lot of study lately, and now with DNA, initially DNA was all physical things.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's a lot of research shows that a lot of character comes from your DNA. So when you come in, you're not a total blank page. The other thing that happens is the environment you're in, but the real deal is a lot of people look at this and they use their environment as an excuse to not to do anything other than just be terrible.
Right.
And use all that stuff as excuses. The nice things about being a human mammal is we have the ability to reason. And I think if you look at our culture, the way the media is, and especially in the U.S., it's not this way everywhere in the world. It's all hyping about you got to be tall and skinny and rich and drive a Porsche, and that makes you somebody. Well, I don't agree with that. Never did, and probably won't ever agree with that. And so I'm convinced that if you have a desire to do something, you got to let people know. And when you let the right people know, if you're sincere, and the people who knows real sincerity, you know that.
Sure.
And when they recognize you're sincere, then all of a sudden you start getting help, assistance, and advice, and you use what you can, and maybe you're not ready for all of it. And that's really attributed to my to what little success I have. I paid attention. I enjoyed hanging around older people because somewhere in my weird little brain, I knew that they already knew.
Mm-hmm.
And I hung around my cool friends, and the people that I hung around with, they were kind of thinkers too. Even though we were 17, 16, 14, we just talked about the stuff that was not the normal at the time. And that's kind of where it all started.
Now, John, I've got a little right here in my little fingers here, a list of how one can develop their personality, and you've already alluded to this, and I think one of the things you see on this list over and over again is expanding your own world, reading something every day, reaching out to people who know about stuff that you don't, basically sort of building your very own character. But what are some of the other resources out there if a young person or heck anybody's listening to this program saying, you know, this is making sense to me, I'm a little bit in a rut? Where can they go? You'd mentioned Napoleon Hill earlier. Are there other authors, or where can folks find more information on this subject?
Well, I'm glad you're asked. For years and years, there's been this big campaign about self-improvement.
Mm-hmm.
It started basically in 1910 with a guy named Wallace Wattles. And
sorry?
Wallace Wattles.
Say that 3 times fast. Wallace Wattles.
Wallace Wattles.
Okay.
Yeah, that works. And Wallace was kind of an interesting character, and he wrote a really thin little book called The Science of Success. And the next thing that happened that really created the basis for everything in the motivational world that we live in now was in the 1920s, early 30s, Andrew Carnegie, who was a steel magnate, hired Napoleon Hill to find out what made people successful.
Now, this is the Carnegie of the famous Carnegie libraries all over the country.
Yes.
Okay.
He's not associated with Dale Carnegie,
right?
But they're they kind of operated on the same level, and so it started off with Wallace Wattles and then Napoleon Hill, and then in the 60s and 70s, the people that I really paid attention to was Wayne Dwyer, and Dale Carnegie, and a guy named Robert Ringer. Robert Ringer wrote a book about winning through intimidation, and I couldn't wait to read it because it's like, now what is this really saying? Because I don't want to be forceful and intimidating unless I have to be, and then I can be a pretty big chihuahua, but anyway, Robert Ringer says, well, the way you intimidate somebody, and especially in the business world, is just show up prepared. That's all.
Wow.
Just show up prepared. Eventually, he changed the name of his book because he got so much pushback from it, but I still love the title. And now, in the late 90s, well, probably all the 90s and now till 2014, you go online and, man, everybody and their dog is doing motivation stuff, but if you boil it down to its rawest essence, it goes all the way back to Wallace Wattles.
So it comes back to those basic folks. If folks want to read Napoleon Hill, Wallace Wattles, you recommend Robert Ringer?
Yes.
Okay. What, I talked about the math of the basics. What, and you sent me a little punch list here as folks are listening. I mean, some of the simple things that we take for granted. What is it? You're first coming in, you meet someone. What eye contact? You talked about that. The firmness of your handshake. Does it get down to those basic exercises that you need to discipline yourself and do every time? Is that another way where folks can sort of start building?
Well, it really doesn't get down to that. It starts there.
Okay. Better put, yeah.
It starts there. And first of all, you have to be pretty secure with who you are. Some time ago, I used to want to be tall, but when I figured out being short was more of an asset than being tall, then I started cashing in on it. And when I walk in a room, I usually have my cowboy hat on, my boots, and I didn't start dressing that way, grow my mustache and get my glasses I didn't do that to attract attention. It's just who I am, and that's who I'm comfortable with. And when you meet somebody, the first thing you do is you start asking them about themselves. That's the key. But when you're talking to them, you look them in the eye, your handshake's sincere, and you do, just your body language makes them feel comfortable. And it's not long till they'll want to listen to you.
Words of wisdom, folks. This is your host, Ben Buehler-Garcia. Wow, what a great hour so far. We've got one segment left here on Daily Mail. Give us a call, 520-751-1041. I'll be right back with our guest, John Esslinger. Oh, Jim, you got some good stuff. I like this. Folks, the burden I have to bear. The Lords, Del Lords, Okay. I'm stuck with a producer that doesn't say anything. That's why we call him Silent Jim. Thank goodness for pen and paper. Pen and paper? Pen and paper. We're back, folks. This is your host, Ben Buehler-Garcia on Daily Mail. We're joined by Renaissance man John Esslinger, and we're just talking about the importance of having a personality and developing a personality. If you think you don't have one yet, there's ways you can do to improve that. But John, real quick before we get into that, I think the importance of the liability of folks not working to improve themselves. You made an interesting comment before we took the break about why you growing the mustache and the way you dress and kind of you didn't do that to impress people. You did that because that's just you. So one of the values or is one of those foundational stepping stones, recognizing and accepting who you are to begin with. So often today, particularly with young people, we talked about Picasso's quote, that's the age of sincere insincerity for them. How important is it to just recognize and be at peace with yourself first and then move forward from there?
Well, if you don't recognize yourself and are at peace with yourself in the beginning and work at it all along, you're not going to have a very pleasant life. And, we both know people who live a long time and they're never happy about anything and they're always struggling. And the thing that just gets all over me more than anything when it comes to dealing with people, when we talk about these kind of things, a lot of these people have excuses. Well, I just don't. Living in the United States of America, there's no excuse. The only excuse is internal, and you're just setting yourself up for a miserable life, and you'll be doing it without me. You can be assured of that.
Yeah, I tell you, all you have to do is spend a little bit of time on Facebook, and you find a lot of people are just straight up angry. I mean, gosh, you know, holy cow. So what if you don't choose to take those steps to make yourself better, to develop, if you don't have a personality, or if you have a personality and you want to hone it, what is the downside? What is the liability of not being agreeable? How can that adversely impact someone's life?
I think the adverse effect there is if you don't do it, that's the adverse effect. Because this works. This works just like the sun coming up every morning. And the only thing that could be a liability is if you mismanaged it and became, like you said, a yes person, or you didn't recognize some of the facts that you're dealing with the individual you're dealing with, and you set yourself up for getting in trouble. But if you hang around the right people all the time, then when you meet somebody that's not there, it's just kind of like a pet, a cat or a dog, when they meet a human, they know when that human's a good person. I think there's something going on there with real people. And even when I meet somebody like that, I keep my distance, but I'll visit with them and get to know, because you never know what you might learn that'll be an asset in the next scene, if you will.
One of the things I kind of joked about Facebook, but I was serious there in that as you look at the way people can help improve their personality and coming back to accepting yourself first, just folks have a tendency to project their own misgivings or their own anger. And it seems like now it's a lot easier for people to judge others first. Yeah. And that just that's not a way to win friends and influence people.
Well, we all have our moments, and I'll guarantee you.
Some more than others, yeah.
Yeah, you can talk to my cool, awesome Dr. Squeezy, my wonderful wife. I have my moments. But I have to be really discreet about that because I recognize the liabilities of not being discreet about that. Mm-hmm. So what other things can people do to just want this to be? We talk, and it's interesting, John, a theme that comes up on this show very often, and you alluded to it in your life as well, the importance of finding a mentor and finding someone else who knows, who can help you, who can develop this. But what are the sorts of steps you literally put together a little punch list for me here today of steps that people can take to help along the road of developing their personality, or even maybe just they've got it, maybe bringing it out, helping it blossom a little bit more. We've got just about 5-6 minutes left. Expound on that if you would. Share some wisdom with the folks. Just 1, 2, 3. Well, let's just talk about men in general.
Okay.
And I really work at being a gentleman, and I do that because it's from my heart. And if you work at it, it becomes part of who you are, and people sense that. A sense of humor really works. For women, what I've noticed about women, first of all, I love a sense of humor, but I love being around women who are really gracious and open and willing to listen and share.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do those things, you tear down the barriers so you can start getting to what's really matters. And I'll be honest with you, Ben, sometimes I think about this and sometimes I just wonder how it really works, because what I really know, it maybe is just a little bit about how it really works. So we probably ought to put together a study and figure out how it really works.
Well, you ought to write a book, John.
Well, I just finished my first book.
Aha. How's that coming? Yeah, just done, huh?
Well, the manuscript's done, and matter of fact, a week after next, my cool, awesome Dr. Suze and I are going off for a few days, and the goal is to get this final edit done so we can get it to the professional editor, so we can get this thing out. I want to get it out by the end of the year.
Well, congratulations. Well, you let us know so we can have you back on the show. Go through it a little bit.
Okay.
Well, now, we do have more time than that, but
Okay.
One thing you said is interesting to me, particularly in today's society, if you will, if I can even call that anymore, but the importance of being a gentleman, of being proper, of being well behaved. It seems like we shouldn't have to bring that up again, but on occasion, it's time to not be well behaved, but there's also a way to handle that. When you're being forceful with someone, there's also a right way and a wrong way to do that. Expound upon that a little bit, if you would. What is it voice? What can you use? And the phrase here is use the right words when you tell someone to go pound sand.
Well, first of all, you have to recognize the situation. You know, what's at stake. I used to be really volatile, and I still am up to a point. But one thing changed all that. Because of my cool, awesome wife, some years ago, as you know the story, she recommended I start taking acting lessons. And I was just, it's like, do what? This is the last thing in the world I thought I'd ever want to do. And I did. And acting's all about emotions. And I had some outstanding instructors. So I started learning how to emote and not have it come right from your core. I'm still working on that. But there comes a time, I have a situation going now with some individuals out of the country, and I got several $1,000s worth of equipment that isn't back yet. Okay. And I found myself, I come unhinged this past week because they just sandbagging me. But I still have to back up and regroup and think about it and be calm and figure out how to settle it. But if one of the things I noticed a long time ago about dealing with people, if you really give a lot of thought as to how to nail them without really making them feel threatened and going on the defensive, they'll stay amenable and agreeable. And usually you wind up getting more than you even ask for.
And how do people know, and I guess you never really know, but folks need to recognize that sometimes it's time to just disengage and move on, right? I mean, at some point you just say, okay, there's no sense in being like a dog on a bone. It's just there's more to be lost than to gain by continuing to push this.
Well, that's a good question, and that's something that I've had to work on really hard because and when I recognized sometime back, you got to keep your ego out of it. If you keep your ego out of it and just look at the facts, then when you start looking at the facts, then you'll know when to back off. Mm-hmm. And then that's really important to have somebody around you to kind of follow up with that and give you some insight on what they just heard. And sometimes I have to kind of stick my head under the pillow and go, oh, shucks, I really shouldn't have done that. But
well, what is, coming back to the mentor, as you're developing, we started this conversation, we're focusing mostly on personality. And I think what people so often are missing are someone who, you've got a great wife, someone who's able to provide that feedback to you so it helps you hone and develop your own discipline. And discipline is so important in so many things. But in this case, just explain again, you've got a great group of friends, you've got a great wife, but explain to folks how important it is if they don't have someone that they can depend on, that they can trust to give them the real feedback, just how important that is.
Well, that's when I think then is when you have to go on your own and start doing some research. If you like tennis, find a group that has tennis players in it. Or if you like playing checkers, it doesn't matter. Anything you like, find somebody. And nowadays that stuff is really available everywhere. And show up, whatever it is. If it's a knitting club, show up with a smile and enthusiasm, and let them know you're serious. And sooner or later, if you're honest with them and yourself, you will find the mentor.
There you go. Anything else, John? We got about a minute left. Anything I told you to go by fast. Anything else you want to share? You want to emphasize with folks? And really, honestly, you're one of those guys that just walks in the room and those people sense something different about you. So I want the listeners to be able to benefit from that.
Well, thank you, Ben.
Rapid fire. Give it to us. A couple more.
Well, just be yourself and have fun. And when you walk in with a smile on your face, everybody wants to know why, and you give them a chance for you to tell them.
There you go. That's it. Walk in with a smile on your face and let them ask why.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. John, thanks for joining us here on Daily Mail. Hey, folks, you can hear, if you missed this, if you liked it, you want to share it with your friends, all the American Warrior Daily Mail programs are podcast, 104.1 KQTH. Look it up. Next week on Daily Mail, there's a group called the Moyer Foundation, was founded by Major League All-Star Jamie Moore and his wife, Karen. They were the subject of a recent HBO documentary film, One Last Hug. Camp Aaron, it's the nation's largest network of bereavement camps for children and teens who are grieving significant losses. It's going to be a great show. Tune in next week, 1 o'clock right here on 104.1 KQTH. This has been your host, Ben Buehler-Garcia. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Have a great Sunday.